Everybody's getting fidgety and wants to go, especially me. So if we could have you take your seats, we're going to start right away.
Okay, so I'd like to speak with you briefly at the end of this education session. There's a few questions I'd like to ask you, and maybe we could establish a contact with respect to evolution of the program. Oh. Okay, so who is Multi-Material Stewardship Western? For your sake and mine, I'm just going to refer to us as MMSW from now on. We are a not-for-profit organization. We were formed on behalf of the steward members of MMSW who, via the Saskatchewan MOE's regulation, must enter into a program or form a program of their own whereby they can pay for up to 75% of the net costs to manage recycling generated from the residential stream. We are a member of the Canadian Stewardship Services Alliance. They are also a not-for-profit and they're national in scope, whose primary role is to work to harmonize stewardship programs across Canada. And so what that means is, in a nutshell, if you are an obligated steward and you are obligated in more than one province in Canada, which most are, CSSA works to make that as seamless and trouble-free a process as possible. So, for example, if you are Unilever Incorporated and you are providing personal care products and packaging, of course, to residents in provinces all across Canada, you're obligated in BC, but that's a slightly different program than the Saskatchewan program that you're also obligated in, which is again slightly different than the Manitoba program, which you're also obligated in, and which is slightly different than the Ontario program, which you are also obligated in. So CSSA really works to kind of help smooth that out for stewards. So essentially, when you're a Unilever or when you're a restaurant food group or what have you, you're busy doing what it is that you do, and you're not so involved in making sure that your recycling package, your packaging or product packaging gets recycled. That really falls to the good folks at CSSA and our programs across Canada. Joanne spoke a little bit about extended producer responsibility, but I want to provide you with an explanation of what it is once again. We're finding it's still relatively new in Saskatchewan, so collectively we're really still all trying to get our heads around what it is and how it works. So essentially what it is, it's more than anything, it's an environmental policy approach. Its intent is to incentivize the improvement and recyclability of printed paper and or product packaging that's in the marketplace right now. It is intended to shift the responsibility for dealing with paper and packaging up the supply chain to those industries that are producing that material as a means of doing business, rather than it being fully funded by the municipal tax dollar. So it shifts the cost burden up the chain somewhat. It's also intended to send a bit of a market signal to stewards as well, whereby, if they are, this is just a crude example, but if you are making a widget and your widget is this big, but in order to compete on retail shelves, you're putting it in a package this big, and it's made out of multiple layers of different types of plastic and very difficult to recycle, that is going to result in a higher per unit fee for you than something that is smaller, made out of a material that's easy to recycle, etc. So it's intended to send a bit of a market signal to incentivize innovation or different choices in product packaging. That's a term that I use, but just to make sure that everybody's clear, if you just take a moment and think about all that stuff that goes into those of you who have curbside programs, if you just think about all that material that goes into your curbside program, or if you are a depot-based program, if you just stop and think about all of the materials that go into your depot bins, that's typically what I mean. So our technical term is waste, packaging, and paper, WPP, so you might hear that acronym, but just know that that generally refers to that, you know, fairly well-known collection of recyclable materials, paper, tin, glass, plastics, what have you. So the Saskatchewan Packaging and Paper Stewardship Program regulation states that stewards of that material either need to join an organization, that's where we come in, or create a program of their own whereby they can establish payment for up to 75% of the net costs. The overwhelming majority of stewards have joined MMSW. It's kind of a no-brainer. If you can imagine grocery stores having to somehow get together and launch a program that only deals with that material that comes out of their grocery stores and only to the residential sector. Likewise, then another retail-based organization would then have to launch its own program for its own slice of.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome and thanks for coming. I'm really, really pleased that this is where all the hard-working people are, I think, because you've come to a place where you can actually need to do something about municipal services. Everybody else is down at the cannabis session, where you really can't do anything about it, but maybe they're giving us free samples, I don't know. Anyway, definitely on the low-budget portion of this, there's a lot of information that Kelly and Joanne, I know that. I know her quite well, actually. But anyway, Joanne and Kelly have given you. And I'm going to be talking about one regional group's efforts to try and grapple with the whole picture. How many people here are representing municipalities that are involved with a regional waste management system? So quite a few. That's good. Okay, so the 16 to 43 Waste Management Corporation, people ask where it is, and I don't know how close you can read that, but if you drew a line between North Battleford and Saskatoon and to PA and back and forth, we're kind of in the middle. And there are the names of the towns and RMs that are involved. So Maymont, Blaine Lake, Douglas, Radisson, and Hafford. And I'm pleased to notice that we have one of our representatives there. We have the Mayor of Radisson. And are there any others from here? I haven't seen any. Oh, there he is, okay. And the Mayor of Hafford. Good, I'm glad to see that. So how did it get its name is the other, all this technical stuff. How did we get our name? Well, Highway 16 on the south, Highway 40 in the middle, and Highway 3 to the north, and after a while it comes out to 16 to 43 Waste Management, which, if you're looking for something that you can write down easily, you might have chosen just something else, but it works, and people actually know us by now, which is a good thing. So, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We did this because our communities did this because they were interested in managing the costs of waste management in their communities, quite obviously. The bad was a shared resentment of the predominant waste management company that was servicing them, thinking that possibly there are some ways to make things a little cheaper, frankly. And the ugly is that despite all of that, really, there is such a lot to know about this industry, and I think you've heard some of that example here, and there's 5 times that much out there. None of us really knew very much. There's a blue bin, and there's a black bin, and there's a hole in the ground, and then there's somebody comes and takes the stuff and takes it away. It's actually the business is quite complicated, and we were green going in. What do we do? Well, we're a full-service waste management, landfill, recycling facility. Yes, we are full service, but we have some things puzzle us. We try to do everything. We provide our member municipalities with their services in terms of collection, either ourselves or through associations with other organizations and companies. How we got developed is interesting. It had its roots in an intermunicipal planning, like a planning district. The proponent municipalities decided to act together to get something to happen, which was the first fruit of that regional planning process. And the other thing that was important was that when they did decide to move forward on something, they decided to bring some money to the table. And not just bringing money to the table, but to go find the money necessary to do some of the stuff to get this organization and this site off the ground. Yeah, that's just a repeat of what I just said, but it was important. So turning failure into opportunity, we did have an opportunity. We had an abandoned hog farm in our area. And it was available from the trustee, I suppose you could call the receiver of the bankruptcy property. There were two properties. One was a quarter section, which is future planning, and the other one was in 56 acres with some buildings on it. That's all here. Future planning, we wanted to make sure that there was going to be enough landfill locations that would be suitable for landfill, that would be in perpetuity, looking 50, 75 years out. And so currently that's farmland and good farmland, so we leased that out. The part that's in close there to the town of Hafford, actually right between Hafford and Spears, if you're counting, that had 4 buildings on it. We've taken one up for recycling and particularly for our baler. And there's a little office building as well. And the rest of it is the landfill cells. So I'll quickly go through the slides. It's an old hog barn, stupid. So there was a big mess when we got there because they had managed to take the hogs out, but not with the hogs left behind. And you can imagine what that was like. But we did take them to one building. We've already removed all the pens and made that into a place for storage of bales and stuff that's going on. You can see the thing on the right there is the process of having to pump out the sewage lagoons, or the manure lagoons. And now they're not sewage lagoons, but now they are, I just want to get up to that. Oh, I'll get there shortly, I guess. Cost, just remember about sewage lagoons. The cost, 1.5 million, a little bit more than that. That's how much the capital costs were when getting going. Sources were grants, none, absolutely none. Well, I'm sorry, there was some. SUMA, I think, gave us a small grant in the order of 20,000 to buy a compact, not a compactor, but a cart lifter, for which we are grateful, so thank you. Municipal investment was where the money came from, and of course you have to go out and find that through banks and so on. So we have a board of directors. They're patient. One of them's here, one of them's over there, and the other stayed home. It's a lot of work doing this. It's like once a month at least, meetings and having to live through the process. I give them great credit, because it's not always been easy. I'm sure it's always been interesting, but it's not always easy. And you can be patient on the one hand, and sometimes you just got to push through. So I'm proud that we can be proud of our nice little landfill cat there, but it did a lot more than that. It was building roads and creating our own infrastructure and stuff. So, and symbolically, sometimes you got to push your way through to make things happen, and we did a lot of pushing our way through. A few modifications here and there. The old hog barn, you saw that first picture. That's raising the roof so we could get some equipment inside. That sewage lagoon that was there before is now our first landfill cell, so that's the leachate drainage system that's going into the bottom, or is in the bottom. That was a smelly job. This is lowering some equipment, or bringing some equipment into the building. This is a baler, a large baler, which we use for, okay, whatever. We use that for baling all our recycling that's collected in the municipalities, and we also primarily use it for baling agricultural grain bags. That's something we were trying to specialize in, something we're trying to do. It's a revenue producer. We have been shipping them overseas. I'll get to that in a moment. We do accept, what do? We do accept for recycling end-of-life electronics, which we made an arrangements with, what's the name of that? EPRA. Yeah, that's been a good one for us. What we didn't want to do was have people coming to the landfill, just treating it as a landfill. We didn't want them coming through, what do I do with this thing? We wanted them to get the service that they needed, and we didn't want to see carpets and TV sets and oil cans and so on in the ditches. There's been enough of that over the years, and it was time to stop it. So we basically said, well, yeah, we'll take it. And so unless it's a hazardous waste in the legal sense of that, or corpses of various things, critters, we accept it, and we try to find a way to move forward with it. So we've been doing things like making arrangements with the EPRA, and Crush Environmental takes our motor oils and filters and that kind of stuff. And I'm not too sure if we're caught up to where we need to go in the long run, but at least the little pile of things we don't know what to do with isn't getting any bigger, so I guess they're kind of making headway there. So didn't want to leave stuff in the dishes, and we're still worried about propane bottles and paint cans and automotive batteries, and you can probably help Todd out with that one. So, household waste collection, we either do that with our own equipment, or we have made an arrangement with another provider to actually lift the carts and bring them out there, so it depends a little bit on the economics of that. We accept tips, of course. That's our own gear there. Grade bags, I did touch on that. We bring them in, we bale them up, and we load them up into sea cans, and we have been shipping them to Vietnam, I think that one went to. The plastics market is changing. Now for agricultural plastics, which is LPD, I just got this note today, and I won't quote sources or anything else, so just a note to let you know we are no longer accepting plastic film, plastic bags, plastic wrap, and that sort of material. This includes garbage bags and plastic grocery bags. This is from a waste sorting firm. So we encourage your customers who bag their recyclables to empty the bags in their recycle bins and take the bags home to reuse or throw them in waste. Due to the China National Green Sword program and the strict limits that they have put on what they will allow across their borders, recycling companies are looking for ways to clean up their product. Plastic wrap and film is considered a contaminant and is extremely hard to remove on the sorting lines. And I'm just thinking to myself, when you have that knowledge and you go out and look at the landfill in the morning and you see the stuff that didn't get covered last night blowing around, it's all plastic bags. And you hear about different municipalities right across North America and in Europe, of course, banning the existence of these things, but it seems to me somehow never ending. This is not a problem that's going to go away and it's going to cause us pain. It's also an opportunity, I think, if we want to look at it right, because that plastic does have to be dealt with and recycled somehow, somewhere. And logically, I guess we would do that closer to home than China. And I guess in kind of a funny way, that's what China's trying to tell us. But, you know, coming soon to a theater near you is dealing with plastic bags. So we can't just leave it up to Los Angeles and New York City. Aspen Innovation Park, which I think appeared somewhere in here. Yeah, there it goes. That's an initiative, an economic development initiative that was part of the landfill development process. So we're looking at the buildings and monetizing them, monetizing our assets. So we have for 3 extra buildings now. They're 20,000 square feet. They're relatively new buildings, and they're in really good shape, except for the fact that they're divided into hog pens inside, but there's nothing that a skid steer and a little bit of hard work won't fix that up. We are developing our plastics recycling program, but that's mostly focused on the agricultural side because that's where we know there's a market. We have some studies done on aquaculture. There's been some expressions of interest, none of them with a checkbook attached, but expressions of interest anyway. Biomass and solar energy are always things that are interested in. Biomass conversion of waste to energy is typically thought to be large scale if you visualize what's going on in Edmonton, but you're beginning to hear about some scalable projects that you can actually come down to the size which we might be able to use it at a regional level. Partnerships, Redberry Lake Biosphere Reserve, which is actually what I sort of represent standing here, or sitting here, as its chair. We've used the Redberry Lake through its associations with university profs to provide some studies, particularly on some of those options for us, and also on the how do we handle the whole biomass thing as well. There's some profs and their graduate students, doctoral students who are looking into that. So through that association with the Biosphere Reserve, which is Saskatchewan's only UNESCO site, incidentally, that is one of the partnerships that we kind of value. North Saskatchewan River Basin Council, that's an important one because it links all the rural and urban municipalities, but particularly the rural ones around us. So, and we can go on to, sometimes we even get prizes. Here's a contest for you. Can you find the 2 gentlemen in this room in that picture? I'll give you 7 seconds. There's one up at the top and one near the bottom. So anyway, we were given an award for our innovation, which I think it's nice to be rewarded. I've learned over my life that you can't eat an award unless it has a checkbook attached to it. So you get a little trophy and a picture. It's nice, but it doesn't pay the bills. Some takeaways, and then I'll go away and you can leave then. Budgets can be a challenge. When you begin business planning and developing budgets, make sure you think about contingencies because they do arise. Allow for cost overruns. Do a periodic reality check on your cash flow situation. Sometimes things don't come in on the same time frame that you had planned for them to come in, and that can set your whole program on its ear until you get all that kind of sorted out. And I guess the other thing, will your clients be ready for what you're doing? So you're always sort of, you're really, it's a service industry. You're trying to deal with and serve a large number of masters. It's all the residents plus particularly the administrators and the counselors and so on that we actually have to do the work with. A few things to think about. We need to leave this room and swear we'll never use the word garbage again. And we remove the word dump from our vocabulary. That's not what it is. Remove the word just about your staff. They're not just laborers, they're not just truck drivers, they're not just operators. These are people who we must respect because they are the ones that actually do the work for this. And this is a changing labor market, and if we're going to have good people, they need to be treated well. It's not a job that people think of or have thought of as being one that confers great honor, to be the guy that works at the dump. So there's a reason why I'm trying to put this all together. We have to think of this in a much more technical and forward-thinking way. Never tell your employees, this is an old restaurant thing, never tell your employees that the customer is always right, because they're usually not. But your employees nonetheless have to make them feel that they're right. So to berate an employee for cheesing off somebody who was giving them a hard time is an uncomfortable situation. But you can't just tell your customers, tell your employees the customer is always right and just be nice. And yeah, anyway, it's a difficult thing. You have to mentor them very, very hard, I think. And last thing, always remember that the waste management industry is ultimately a service industry. It's technical, it's got all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, it's service. It's service to your municipal residents, services to your business. Thank you for that. A kind of a who's who out there for those of you who are looking. The company 16 to 43 is a municipal organization, and its board of directors is sitting up there. Thank you very much. Any questions?
I'm Rennie Harper. I'm the mayor of Nipawin,
Okay.
and we are just undertaking a regional landfill of our own with 5 other partners. And one of the things that we've come across, and I didn't hear you mention it, what have you found happens with sharps? The sharps that used to end up or always end up in household garbage.
What is it again?
I'm interested. This thing not on?
Yeah, it's just that I have
Okay,
20
I'm
years.
sorry. I'm interested to know what you did with sharps. You know, the needles.
Okay. We do not take care of our health facilities' wastes. They're
But-
gathered by them, and we have not had a problem with sharps in the community in particular that I'm aware of, in any community.
Okay, so you must have a way then to deal with the sharps that the people that are diabetic, the needles that they're using in their homes, those kinds of things. You haven't found any issue with any of that.
From my perspective, no,
Okay.
but mayors, one and all, have sharps been an issue in your municipalities? They are an issue for sure.
Yeah.
I know we've had some concern about at what point do dirty diapers from seniors on medication become a hazardous waste, because we do get them and we do bury them. But sharps is a whole other thing.
I'm Dave Summers, Mayor of Radisson, and part of the board. With sharps, I mean, we have numerous people in our community who are diabetic. I'm diabetic, as is my wife. Most of the people get the containers from their pharmacies that they're given and are very good at putting them in there and then just taking them back to the pharmacy. They give you a new free of charge one. So
And they end up in your landfill.
we haven't had an issue at our landfill. I understand what you're saying, and they could. We haven't yet. I think when we hit it, then was when we'll have to work at it. It might be something we need to talk about, Ron, at our next meeting. And there comes Ron.
So,
Yeah,
Ron Kowalchuk, Mayor of Hafford.
thanks. I know in Hafford we do have a health center and people can return them there. But like I said, there hasn't been a big issue. Like you can usually take them to. But other than what returned to the health center and to the drugstore, haven't had an issue.
They just end up in your landfill. You maybe just don't know it.
Well, that could be, but you know, like other than that, but we haven't had too many requests about it.
So there is a company in, outside of Saskatoon and Aberdeen that is set up to handle those materials, and most pharmacies are supposed to deal with them, and they do handle most of them. It's called Biomed. Yeah, so you need to check with Biomed, and you know, there's not really a reason why those should be ending up in landfill. I don't think they charge a lot for that service, and they can handle it correctly. So that would be one that you would want to investigate.
Thanks, Joanne. Any questions?
Get up there and you forget the name of the company.
Thank you very much.
behalf of SUMA and everybody here, I'd like to thank you very much for coming and sharing with us. And for the delegates, this brings the day to an end. And I just want you to remember that there's a SUMA hospitality night tonight at 8 o'clock at the Doubletree. Thanks for coming.
And if you want to come in, go.